Good day, dear students. As you see, today we will discuss very important questions. We will tell about biochemistry of the tooth tissue and saliva, about chemical composition, features of metabolism in enamel, dentin, pulp, and cement, mineralization mechanism, physicochemical properties and biochemical composition of saliva, the role of the calcium, phosphorus, fluorine, vitamins, and hormones. We will also discuss different biochemical changes in the pathology of the dentition. Let's start. The teeth are a complex organ consisting of three types of dense tissue that differs in the structures and origin: enamel, dentin, and cementum. In addition to them, there is a loose connective tissue that is a part of the dental pulp. Enamel is the hardest tissue, approaching quarts of the scale of the hardness. It covers the crown of the tooth. Its features is that immediately after formation it loses cells, and that's why it's incapable of regeneration. And without cells, it maintains its condition for a long time. Also, it is exposed to various factors. Before teething, the enamel is covered with the organic membrane consisting of the cells-free layer, approximately 1 micrometer thick, and a layer of the enamel-producing cells, about 10 micrometer thick. It's called a cuticle. Immediately after tooth erupts, the cuticle is erased. When enamel comes into the contact with saliva, the tooth is covered with the organic acellular membrane of the salivary origin containing desquamated epithelium. It is resistant to acids but is easily destroyed by mechanical action. On its surface there are bacteria, the product of their metabolism, the death bacteria from plaques that calcify with the formation of the teeth stones. The basis of the tooth is dentin. It contains cells, odontoblasts, which cover the inside of the tooth, its cavity. These cells allow the dentin to retain its ability to regenerate throughout the life of the tooth. The corner part of dentin is covered with enamel, and the root part is covered with cementum. Enamel, dentin, and cementum differ in their chemical composition. Dental pulp is a soft connective tissue containing nerves and blood vessels that nourish the tooth. If we tell you about the chemical composition of cementum, dentin, and enamel, they are bone-like substances. The high proportion of inorganic matter they contain gives them their characteristic hardness. The organic components of cementum, dentin, and enamel mainly consist of collagen, glycoproteins, and proteoglycans. Part of the protein are soluble, like albumin, globulins, and part are insoluble in the water, or for example, collagen or enamelin. We have a number of enzymes in our tooth, like alkaline and acetic phosphatase. The most important mineral components is apatite, as in bone. Hydroxyapatite is the hard mineral forming hexagonal crystals. Hydroxyapatite is the main form of calcium in all tooth tissues, till 97% in enamel and about 70% in dentin. The rest of the calcium is present as amorphous, non-crystalline calcium phosphate, mainly in dentin. Phosphate ions constitute the main component of the ions present in the crystal, located in octahedral channeling running through the crystal structures. 2/3 of these channels are occupied by calcium ions, and 1/3 of the channels are occupied by the negative fluorine ions, fluorapatite. trace elements in the human tooth. They are iron, zinc, copper, and manganese. Now let's tell about all these tissue of the tooth separately and in details. And we start from enamel. Enamel acts as a protective tissue that covers the exposed part of the tooth, the crown. Tooth enamel is the hardest and most highly mineralized substance of the tooth. Most of the mature enamel is made up of the inorganic substances, up to 76-77%. In the immature, only 37%, and enamel of the baby teeth up to 80%, with water and protein according the other percent. Structural units are apatite crystals, from which enamel prisms are formed. Enamel gains mechanical strength by the interweaving hydroxyapatite crystals. This high mineral content gives it hardness, but also brittleness. The boundaries of the crystal, the higher the degree of the mineralization. Crystals and prisms are orientated perpendicular to the surface. Interprismatic space are filled with the organic molecules and water. Inorganic components are represented by the apatite crystals, hydroxyapatite till 75%, carbonate apatite from 12 to 90%, chlorapatite till 4.4%, and fluorapatite until 1%. Other mineral compounds up to 2%. Enamel crystals differ from crystals of other dense tissue in their size. They are approximately 10 times larger than dentin and bone tissue crystals. See here. These crystals combines into prisms that contains millions of the crystals. The prisms are assembled into bundles that run across the enamel layer, curving in a spiral. And the total number of prisms per tooth, you see, till 12 million. The content of the calcium and phosphorus in enamel is about 40 and 80% respectively. In the direction from the tooth surface to dentin, their concentration decreases. Such that calcium outside is about 37 and 8%, and inside till 34 and 5%. Phosphorus, the same, you see, outside 80% and inside 50%. Ideal apatite contains 10 calcium atoms, and the calcium phosphorus molar ratio remains a constant from 1.62 to 1.78, and average 1.67, and replacing calcium with chromium or barium or magnesium leads to a decrease in the calcium phosphorus ratio, and these contribute the development of the caries. The next elements in the quantitative terms is magnesium, up to 0.9%. The amount of the zinc and iron is also relatively high. The composition and properties of hydroxyapatite are affected by the composition and properties of the solution that bathes these crystals. In the outer layer of enamel, the high concentration of calcium and phosphorus makes its resistance to acids. The constants of fluorine in the surface layer is 10 times greater than in the underlying one. The same applies to chlorides. The constant of sodium and magnesium and iron carbonates increases towards the dentin. upside down, copper, potassium, aluminium. They are evenly distributed throughout the enamel and outside and inside. In the mineral composition of enamel may vary depending on the nature of the diet. The strongest karyostatic effect is shown by the fluorine, phosphorus, less copper, molybdenum, vanadium, boron, lithium, gold, and, pay attention, magnesium, lead, silicon, selenium. They are considered karyogenic elements. The water contains in enamel varies depending on maturity. Mature enamel has about 2% up to 3% of the water. Immature, generally 20%, but up to 44%. Water can be present in two forms: free water, about 1%, and bound is included in the hydration shell of the apatite crystals, and it contains about 3% of the mass of enamel. Water fills the space between prisms. Organic enamel components make up to a major enamel 90-20%, and in mature only 0.4, no, up to 4% sometimes. In the maturing enamel contains next type of proteins: amelogenins, enamelins, staphyloins, osteocalcins. Initially seen on this scheme, the bulk is represented by amelogenins, up to 90%. As the enamel matures, they are destroyed and the amount of enamelins increases. Amelogenins are heterogeneous groups of the low molecular weight proteins rich in proline, histidine, leucine, glutamine. They are hydrophobic and prone to aggregation. They regulate growth in thickness and width and may also nucleate crystals. Enamelins are acidic proteins highly glycosylated. The secondary structure is represented by the beta structure. The amount of proteins decreases more than in 100 times as enamel matures. Osteocalcin or vitamin K depending calcium binding protein was found in enamel, which by attachment of the calcium polymerizes and passes into the insoluble form, forming a three-dimensional protein network insoluble in neutral medium. One molecule of this protein binds about 10 ions of the calcium, and the network of the protein binds with the calcium to hydroxyapatite and is fixed on the fiber of amelogenins. Thus, enamel proteins matrix arises, which initiates further processes of hydroxyapatite crystallization and determines the location and orientation of the crystals. This determines the sequence of enamel formation and the orderliness and uniformity of its structure. Naphthalene. This is a new, previously unknown acidic enamel protein believed to play the important role in enamel mineralization. In the C-terminal site have their structure facilitating self-assembly and crystal formation. Self-assembly to form the supermolecule structure framework. There are more proteins in the inner part of the enamel than in outer surface. There are in addition to the protein, there are N lipids and monosaccharides, the same present in enamel, but in very, very low concentration. And pay attention that the transport of the minerals in enamel occurs in two directions, from pulp to dentin and after that to enamel, and upside down from saliva. If we tell about amylogenesis, it consists from two stages. First is the secretory is initiation of the formation of the extracellular matrix, organic matrix degradation and crystal growth, the formation of the prismatic structure of enamel crystals. The second stage, maturation, is removal of residual protein molecules and completion of the crystal growth, saturation with the magnesium and fluorine ions. And the third state, mature enamel, is the complication of the formation of enamel and the degradation of the cell line of the enamel organ. It happened after teething due to saliva. Dentin. Dentin is the tissue that forms the main mass of tooth. Dentin is found just under the enamel in the crown of the tooth and under the cementum in the root. It determines the size and the shape of the tooth. The formation of dentin can go on throughout life after teething. Secondary dentin can be formed after teething and filling the cavity of the tooth and less mineralized. Dentin cells, odontoblasts, function throughout the life. And they form a thin layer lining the tooth cavity. Their processes penetrate the dentin to its articulation with enamel, forming the dentinal canalets. They also contain the ending of the nerve fiber penetrating from the pulp. Dental fluid passes through these tubules, and such way they perform atrophic functions. If we tell about composition of the dentin, dentin is a mineralized connective tissue containing up to 72% of inorganic substances, with 70% of organic matrix of the mainly collagenous proteins and approximately 30% of the water. Dentin contains exclusively genetic type 1 collagen. Other proteins components of the dentin are osteocalcin, osteonectin, osteodentin, osteopontin, phosphoproteins, and dentin-specific proteins. And we can see other organic components of the dentin, like glycoproteins, proteoglycans, and phospholipids. A ground substance contains glycosaminoglycans, represented by 100-ethyl-4-sulfate and 100-ethyl-6-sulfate hyaluronic acid, and we use the adhesive properties. Thus, substance contain a large amount of mineral salts and low content of other organic substances like lipids and phospholipids. Oh, here you can see all that I told you about organic and inorganic composition of the dentin. You see its composition a little another than composition of enamel. Mineralized component here less than in enamel. Now cementum. Cementum is a specified bony substances covering the dentin outside of the root under the gum line. It is attached to the bone of the jaw with the little elastic fibers. Cementum is excreted by the cementoblasts within the root of the tooth and is thickest at the root apex. Cement is represented by two types, cellular in the apical part of the root and in the area of the root bifurcation, and acellular covering the rest of the root. Cellular cement is similar its composition to coarse fibrous bone and contains cementocytes. Acellular does not contain these cells and consists of the collagen fibers and matrix. Chemical composition of cementum is about 68 to 70% of inorganic substances There are various forms of the appetite, up to 20% of organic molecules, mainly collagen of different types, and mainly collagen of the first and third type. The concentration in them more than other types of the collagen. Different proteoglycans, lipids, and up to 30% of the water. Dental pulp is a soft connective tissue containing nerves and the blood vessels. The pulp performs atrophic, protective, and reparative functions. The pulp is the part of the center of the tooth made up of the living soft tissue and cells called odontoblasts, fibroblasts, granulocytes, histiocytes, and others. Pulp composed of the 20-30% of inorganic materials, 30% of organic materials, and up to 40% of the water. There are many different, as you see, cells in the pulp, and high concentration of different organic molecule, up to 40% of organic materials, with very wide variance of different proteins. Here we can see and different type of the collagens and glycoproteins and proteoglycans and trace proteins like albumin, globulins, and the number of different enzymes. And of course, if we tell about processes that are popular in the teeth, first of all, we will tell about mineralization, demineralization, and remineralization. Mineralization is due to the precipitation of the calcium phosphate and the growth of crystal of hydroxyapatite. Calcium phosphate is extremely insoluble, and its precipitation will occur spontaneously when elevated level of calcium phosphate ions are present. Mineralization tissue poses mechanism for the focally increasing calcium and phosphate concentration. In non-mineralizing tissue, calcium phosphate precipitation is prevented in the part by the presence of the agents such as pyrophosphate that inhibit mineral growth, and in the part by the storage of phosphate in the organic rather than inorganic form. But pay attention, in the mineralizing tissue, pyrophosphate is destroyed by the action of alkaline phosphatase, which also released free phosphate from the phospholipids, converts organic phosphate into inorganic phosphate ions, and so facilitates mineral deposition. Mineralization occurs in the matrix between collagen fibers. Together with these, in the tissue, in the tooth tissues, we can see pyrophosphorylates, the activator of mineralization that separate pyrophosphate, eliminates inhibition. Therefore, mineralizing is possible only in the presence of pyrophosphorylase. And here you can see the different reasons of the demineralization. First of all is, of course, it's decreasing of saliva pH. After that, violation of the synthesis of collagen and non-collagen proteins. You know, it's depend and from the hormones and from different vitamins. Decrease in the content of the calcium in saliva. And that's why an abnormal proportion of the calcium phosphorus. This ratio, this coefficient, if becomes less than 1.3, it leads to pathological demineralization. At enamel permeability, it's a process that promotes this mineralization and remineralization of enamel. And many factors took part in the regulation of these processes. You know that permeability reduced with the high pH, alkaline environment. Special hormones, parathyroid hormones, took part in activation of the bone and tooth mineralization, and it increased with the age. Permeability increases under the action of calcitonin, calcitriol, hyaluronidase enzymes, carotene, low pH, electrophoresis, and other reasons. And as you see here, we had two lectures about the action of vitamins and hormones in the regulation of metabolism in our body. That's why here I will tell about this only in common details. Without special details, I will tell only about vitamins and hormones that directly took part in the process of mineralization and the normal formation of the tooth. And we start from the action of vitamin A. You know that vitamin A provides the mineralization of the tissue due to activation of the synthesis of a special glycoproteins and proteoglycans, because one of the mechanisms of vitamin action, they binds with a specific region on DNA and block biosynthesis of one proteins and upside down initiate transcription and translation of another proteins, like here glycoproteins, special glycoproteins of the tooth. It's the same necessary for the normal proliferation and growth of the tissue together with the tissue of the bone and the teeth. And when we tell about deficiency of vitamin A, you see that activity of odontoblast and fibroblast decreases, enamel and dentin calcification is impaired, teething in the children is delayed, their placement and development are incorrect. Vitamin C, it's a leader in the formation, normal formation and maturation of the collagen. You know that vitamin T is necessary for the post-translational modification of collagen, hydroxylation of proline and lysine in it. And the hypovitaminosis of vitamin C, scurvy, is manifested together with other symptoms by the losing and tooth loss, loosening and tooth loss. Vitamin D. I hope that you remember that vitamin D took part in the regulation of the calcium and phosphorus metabolism. Vitamin D increases absorption of calcium in the intestine and reabsorption of calcium in the kidney, and it stimulates mineralization in the tooth residues. That's why hypovitaminosis, rickets in the children and osteoporosis in the adult can lead to abnormal processes in the tooth. Such were rickets in the children, hypovitaminosis in the children during the formation of the tooth tissue is manifested by the defective mineralization, hypoplastic defect, decay of the formation of the tooth. And in the adult, the same can appear different problems with the tooth mineralization. Vitamin K, already we tell about osteocalcin. Vitamin K depend protein, and vitamin K took part in additional carboxylation of glutamic acid in number of the protein, and a pairing of this additional carboxylic group in the glutamate increase ability binding of the calcium, and that's why hypovitaminosis of vitamin K lead to problem of the binding of calcium with these special calcium binding proteins, and such way it lead to a problem of the tooth mineralization. And vitamin K, we know, it's the same lead to one of the function of vitamin K, it's inhibitor of radical reactions of peroxidation of cell membrane and phospholipids. And hypovitaminosis of this vitamin lead to enamel depigmentation, reduces the resistance of the tooth tissue, and increases the permeability of the gum capillaries. And if we tell about hormonal regulation, always we can see here the influences of two main hormones, parathyroid hormones and calcitonin. We know that parathyroid hormones, the main function of this hormone is increase the calcium level in the blood. That's why this hormone took part in demineralization of the bone. And calcitonin, upside down, it's an antagonist of parathyroid hormones. But not only, we know that estrogens and androgens, the same they influence, especially estrogens, on the bone mineralization. You know that absence of estrogens, not absence, but another proportion of estrogens in the postmenopause age can lead to osteoporosis. It's one of the main reasons of postmenopause osteoporosis. But an insulin and parotin and glucocorticoids, the same took part in the regulation of the phosphorus and calcium metabolism. Dental plaque. This is a soft layer of organic matrix and bacterial cells deposits on the enamel over the pellicle. Plaque is resistant to being washed off with the saliva, rinsing the mouth, and its surface is covered with the mucous semi-permeable mucoid gel. It is removed when brushing your teeth, but after 2 hours it begins to accumulate. It is believed that plaque protects the enamel since its absence leads to erosion and necrosis of enamel. It acquires pathological significance with its large accumulation, a decrease in the rate of salivation. At first, aerobic microorganisms predominates in it, and then a mixture of aerobic and anaerobic microorganisms. 1 milligram of plaque contains, pay attention, from 5 to 8,000 million bacteria. Certain bacteria in the absence of oxygen produce lactic acid, which dissolve the calcium and phosphorus in enamel. This process, demineralization, leads to tooth destruction. The chemical composition of plaque in different parts of the oral cavity varies depending on the age, diet, hygiene. In overage, it contains 80% of the water and only 20% of the solids. And 40% of the dry residues are minerals: phosphorus, potassium, calcium, sodium, fluorine, zinc, iron, and 60% are organic compounds like glycosaminoglycans, glycoproteins, polysaccharides, and heteropolysaccharides. Sucrose contributes the rapid development of the plaque. The content of fluorine in the plaque can be in 10 and sometimes even 100 times higher than its content in saliva, and ranges from 6 to 180 microgram per kilogram. Fluoride is included in it's from the food, but mainly from water, of course, and from saliva, and can come from the enamel when the pH of the plaque decreases and the enamel demineralization processes are activated. The content of fluoride in the plaque increases with the age. The content of mineral substances in the plaque is quite high. They can be the form of hydroxyapatite, fluorapatite, calcium fluorides, and other. The higher the content of the calcium and phosphorus in the plaque, the less its cardiogenic effect. Dental tartar is the hard formation on the surface of the teeth, which occurs more often on the lingual side of the teeth and near the duct of the salivary gland. Tartar is formed as a result of the precipitation of calcium and magnesium phosphate and carbonate salt from the saliva into the organic matrix of plaque. According to statistics, 75% of people have tartar. And in the presence of gingivitis, even 90% of people show that they have tartar. Tartar contains from 4 to 10% of the water, up to 25% of organic compounds, and up to 80% of the mineral compounds. Its main components are calcium and phosphorus. Highly mineralized stone contains even 30% of the calcium and maybe 60% of the phosphate. In weakly mineralized tartar, calcium concentration is about 20 and phosphate about 12. Tartar also contains magnesium, sodium, zinc, lead, cadmium, and other minerals. From organic components, we can see amino acids, monosaccharides like glucose, galactosamine, glucuronic acid, present in little concentration, but present phospholipids, cholesterol, triacylglycerol, fatty acids, enzymes, the same we can see in the tartar, and also includes food debris, epithelial cells, leukocytes, microbes. The formation of a stone is facilitated by a change in pH of saliva to the alkaline side as a result of accumulation of ammonia under the action of urease on urea. Tartar is a common cause of periodontal disease because on its rough surface food residues, microbes, and epithelial linger, which contributes to the development and maintenance of inflammation. And in turn, the formation of the stone can be promoted by inflammation of the periodontal tissue, along with the change in the chemical composition of saliva, the accumulation of the plaque. Such way, a vicious circle occurs. Tooth erosion. Don't confuse between tooth erosion and the caries. Dental or tooth erosion is defined as a dissolving of the tooth surfaces caused by acidic substances. And caries is different from the tooth erosion. That caries is produced by the result of bacterial development. Generally, in the given individual, all or most tooth surfaces are affected if we tell about tooth erosion. Surfaces of the acid may be from the outside of the body, for example, dietary or environmental, or from inside of the body, for example, acids from the stomach. Erosion may also be related to salivary functions, and treatment, of course, depends from the cause of the erosion. And if we tell about dental caries, of course, is the populous and the famous and one of the common disease occurring in the 98% of the people. Caries is caused by the acidic, are produced by the microorganisms that live on the surface of the teeth. And you know that the main products of anaerobic degradation, anaerobic in the absence of the oxygen of the sugar by enzymes of the plaque bacteria is lactic acid, lactate. Lactate dissolves the calcium and phosphorus in the enamel. This process, demineralization, leads to tooth destruction. Other products of bacterial carbohydrate metabolism include extracellular dextrans, insoluble polymer of glucose that help bacteria to protect themselves from their environment. At the initial stage, the white spot chalky appears on the tooth surface where the enamel loses its luster due to the increase of its porosity and therefore an increase in the light scattering. In place of the accumulation of the plaque, adsorbing sucrose, bacterial enzymes break down the pellicle and organic acid penetrate to the enamel. It's demineralized and a defect is formed where bacteria penetrate. The dentin and pulp have a cell that is responsible to damage by the formation of the secondary dentin, the mineralizing of the dentinal tubules. There is inflammation of the hard tissue of the tooth, the loss of carbohydrate ions, calcium, magnesium. Contribute to the development of the caries, of course, decrease of the rate of salivation, an increase in the viscosity of saliva, an increase in the content of mucins in it. pH shift of saliva to acidic site, acidic pH, and decrease in the degree of saturation of saliva with calcium and phosphorus compounds due to the shift in pH to acidic site. Activation of glucose catabolism enzymes in saliva and plaque due to the development of bacterials lead to development of the caries very fast, and a particular favorable situation for the development of the caries develops during sleep, when lactic acid accumulation due to glycolysis is more active. Consumption of the large amount of pure sugar, the same is one of the main reason of the caries appears. And insufficient intake of fluoride in the body, the same one of the reason of caries appears. Fluorine is the essential element, the presence of which is necessary for the proper formation of the bone and teeth. Fluorine combines with hydroxyapatite to form fluorapatite. Fluorapatite crystals make up a very small proportion of the crystalline components, but they impart strength and acid resistance to the hydroxyapatite crystal. Natural and even more refined food products do not always contain sufficient amount of fluoride. For us, the main sources of fluoride is drinking water, and the optimum content of fluorine in the drinking water is from 0.8 to 1.5 milligram per liter. The normal content in the blood serum is approximately 1 micromole per liter, and it depends from the constant on drinking water. 99% of all fluorine is found in the body in minerals tissues, teeth and bones. Have shown that addition of fluoride at the concentration of 1 part per 1 million to water significantly reduced the likelihood of the tooth decay. Therefore, many water companies now carry out fluoridation of the tap water, but excessive intake of fluoride in the body is harmful and causes fluorosis, which is characterized by the development of the mottled teeth. See here, dental fluorosis. It is extremely common disorder characterized by the hypomineralization of the tooth enamel caused by the ingestion of excessive fluoride during enamel formation. It is cosmetic condition that occurs during first 8 years of life. What is the main causes of dental fluorosis? Of course, on the first place, excess fluoridation of the drinking water, but maybe ingestion of fluoride toothpaste, or overuse of fluoride tablets, or consumption of the processed food made with the fluoridated water. Structurally, an increase in the fluoride intake results in the increase of the porosity of enamel. It is generally believed that the hyperpigmentation on effect of enamel is mainly due to in situ toxic effect on the fluoride, on the ameloblast in the enamel formation. In the extracellular environment, the maturing enamel and excess of fluoride ions alters the rate at which enamel matrix proteins, amylogenin first of all, are enzymatically broken down, and the rate of which the subsequent breakdown product are removed. Fluoride may also indirectly alter the action of protease via the decrease in the availability of the free calcium ions in the mineralization environment. This results in the formation of enamel with the less mineralization. This hypomineralized enamel has altered optical property and appear opaque and lusterless related to normal enamel. It is the brittle and fragile enamel. All symptoms appear after tooth erupt into the mouth. During the second part of our lecture, we will tell about biochemistry of saliva. And saliva, you know, it's a complex mixture of mucus and serous fluid secreted by salivary gland. It is necessary to distinguish between the oral fluid, which also called mixed saliva or whole saliva, from through saliva, the secretion of salivary glands. The oral fluid in the oral cavity represented the total secretion of both the major and minor salivary gland. Detritus of the oral cavity, gingival crevicular fluid, and the content of the gingival pockets, microorganisms, and their metabolic product, the squamated epithelial cells from the oral mucosa, leukocytes, and food debris. Saliva is secreted to the mouth by three major parietal salivary glands: submandibular, parotid, and sublingual glands, and by the numerous minor mucous glands. 1,000 to 1,500 milliliter of saliva is produced daily. The relative contributions of each of these glands to the total amount of saliva secreted overrate: 65% from the submandibular, 23% from the parotid, 8% from the minor mucosal gland, and about 4% from the sublingual salivary gland. Transport of water and electrolytes and synthesis of enzymes, proteins, mucins, and other organic components occurs in the acini, which secrete a fuel isotonic with the plasma. This fluid is then modified in the ducted system by both reabsorption and secretion of electrolytes. And finally, hypotonic saliva is produced. At very low flow, final saliva composition approaches to the composition of the primary saliva, and secretion of bicarbonate anions determines the increase of pH of saliva flowing through the duct. And we can see that during the second stage of final salivation, we can see active absorption of some ions like sodium, calcium ions, chloride, phosphate ions, and passive secretion of bicarbonate and potassium ions. And the osmotic gradient causes the passive transport of the water. There are many different functions of saliva in our body. On this scheme, you can see the sum of these functions. It's a lubrication, digestion, mineralization, buffer, antibacterial, antiviral, protective functions, and many other. Let's tell about these functions. Saliva took part in dissolve of the food chemicals so that they can stimulate the tongue's taste buds. Salivary proteins, gustin, is necessary for the growth and maturation of the taste buds. Saliva creates and feeling the oral comfort by its lubrication action and protection, and lubrication saliva forms a seromucosal covering that lubricates and protects the oral tissue against proteolytic agents. This occurs due to the mucins responsible for lubrication, protection against dehydration, and maintenance of salivary viscoelasticity. Mastication, speech, and swallowing are aided by the lubricant effect of this protein. In addition, they protect this tissue against proteolytic attack by the microorganism by selectively modulating the adhesion of the microorganism to the oral tissue surfaces, which contributes to the control of bacteria and fungal colonization. Cleansing consists in the mechanical cleansing of the oral cavity from the food debris. Accumulation of the microorganism due to the high rate of saliva secretion. Lysozymes, bacteriolysins, and leukocytes containing in saliva exhibit the bactericiding effect. High antibacterial properties provide resistance to caries. Tissue repair depend from the proteins which are produced in glandular cells and that can regulate biochemical processes in the tissues of the oral cavity and digestive tract. Growth factors are formed in them and accelerating the regeneration of the tissue when they are mechanically damaged by food elements. Saliva is a natural disinfectant. Human saliva contains such antibacterial agents as a secretory immunoglobulin A, enzymes, lactoferrin, lysozyme, lactoperoxidase, thiocyanate, hydrogen peroxide, mucins, histatins, proline-rich proteins, stratrins, and cystatins, and all products of acinar gland cells help protect teeth against physical, chemical, and microbial insults. One of the most important indicators of saliva homeostasis, which determines the condition of the teeth, is pH. Normally, at rest, the pH ranges from 6.5 to 7.5, close to neutral. In pathological condition, the pH can shift both to acidic, up to 5.4, to alkaline side, up to 8. These lead to violation of the colloidal crystalline structure of the phosphorus calcium compounds and decrease in their stability in the supersaturated state and violation in the mineralizing function of saliva. The constantly of saliva pH is maintained by the bicarbonate, phosphate, and protein buffer system. Urea plays a special role in the maintaining the pH of saliva. Under the action of urease, urea is converted into carbon dioxide and ammonia. Ammonia, as you know, is an acceptor of proteins and alkalizes saliva. It is interesting that children with the chronic renal failure are less prone to caries because due to the increased content of the urea, they have alkaline saliva. But they have a different problem since ammonia is a cytotoxic and causes gingivitis. The acidity of saliva depends on the rate of salivation, buffer system, and nature of the food, the hygienic states, and the oral cavity, times of the day, and the age. With a low secretion rate, non-compliance with the oral hygiene and the pH of saliva usually shifts to acidic side. Acidic fruits and juice also contribute to this. In pregnant women, saliva pH is shifted to acidic side, as well as a patient after radiation therapy. At night, the pH of saliva decreases. In the morning, the lowest value. In the evening, it rises. With age, the acidity of saliva decreases and carriers resistance increases. pH affects in saturation of saliva with hydroxyapatite. Within the rate from 6 to 8, it is supersaturated with hydroxyapatite, and the pH below 6, it becomes unsaturated and acquires the properties of demineralizing liquid. When saliva is alkalized, the degree of supersaturation with the hydroxyapatite increases and resistance to carriers increases. It's a good, but also badly from other hand, because tartar can be formed. Mineralizing property, saliva supplies minerals and trace elements for the tooth enamel, maintaining its optimum chemical compositions because its supersaturated solution of hydroxyapatites. The calcium and phosphorus ions formed during their hydrolysis diffuse into enamel after teething, and its mineralizing occurs. The content saturation of enamel with these ions with age lead to its maturation, compression of the structure and growth, an increase in the density reduce its solubility and makes it more resistant to carriers. This function also ensures the restoration of the chemical composition of enamel after damage and in the number of disease. Digestion. Digestive function is due to initial stage of digestion. Saliva moistens and softens food, facilitates swallowing, dissolve food chemicals, and acts on them with enzymes, amylase. In saliva, an optimum pH is created for the action of amylase. An activator of amylase is present, chlorine. Protective function consists in the protecting against external influences and supporting of the homeostasis of the oral cavity. Washing the surface of the tooth, saliva affects the structural and chemical composition of it. Glycoproteins and other proteins of saliva and calcium and other substances are deposited on the surface of the tooth enamel from saliva, forming the pellicles that protect the enamel from the action of organic acids. Saliva protects the oral mucosa and organs from the mechanical and chemical influences due to the presence of the various of glycoproteins and the presence of immunoglobulins A and other classes of immunoglobulins. Protect the mucous membranes, and oral wounds are less likely to become infected than other tissue. And saliva contains compounds with the hemicoagulative and fibrinolytic activity, which contributes to rapid healing of wounds. It contains prothrombin, thromboplastin, activators and inhibitors of the fibrinolysis. There are a direct relationship between the function of salivary gland and the condition of the teeth. Hyposalivation and xerostomia, dry mouth, lead to multiple dental caries and even enamel necrosis. And really, we see that the cessation of saliva secretion on one side of the oral cavity leads to damage of the teeth on this side of cavities. For example, removal of gland or ligation of the duct of the salivary gland. Composition of saliva. Saliva is characteristically a colorless dilute fluid. We already tell that its normal pH is around 6.5 and 7.5, and it's depend from many different influences and depend from the concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood the same. When concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood is increased, a high fraction of carbon dioxide is transferred from the blood to the saliva and salivary pH decreases. If carbon dioxide is low in the blood, on other hand, salivary pH increases as a result of a low transfer of carbon dioxide from blood to salivary gland. Normally, about 150 105 1,500 milliliters of saliva produced per day, but it in the adult, the secretion rate in adult it about 0.2 to 0.5 milliliter per minute during the day, and at the night its secretion is in 10 times lower. And the maximum rate of salivation we can see in the children ages about 5-10 years, and then it decreases in adult. Saliva is a hypotonic liquid. It consists about 99% of the water and remaining 0.5 to 2% of solid substances, including different electrolytes and proteins represented by antibacterial compounds, immunoglobulins, various enzymes, glycoproteins, peptides, traces of albumins. Also in saliva we can see small organic molecules such as urea, glucose, hormones, lipids, DNA and RNA, the same present in very low concentration, different secretory products of salivary gland cells, products of the B cells, epithelial cells, and bacteria. The total concentration of inorganic and organic components is generally low when compared with the plasma. That's why it's hypotonic. On this slide, you can see a summarize of the content of the most important inorganic and organic components of the saliva. The components interact and are responsible for the various functions attributed to saliva. At a low rate of secretion, saliva is highly hypotonic. Its osmotic pressure increases with the increase in the rate of salivation, and at its maximum rate, saliva can become isotonic with the blood plasma. There are many, if we tell about inorganic components of saliva, here we have a number of cations and anions. Between the cations, the populace are sodium and potassium. They are involved in the transport of the active compound through the cell membrane. The presence of the sodium in hydroxyapatite increases the solubility of enamel in acids. Sodium regulates salivary osmotic tension. The constant of the potassium is 4-5 times higher than in the plasma. Oppositely, the contents of the sodium is much lower than in the blood plasma. The content of the potassium and sodium in saliva varies significantly during the day. Calcium. Calcium contains in rather high concentration, but the same in almost in 2 times less than in the blood. The most of the calcium, about 60% in saliva, is in ionized state, and the rest, 40-45%, is associated with the proteins. One protein molecule can bind about 130 calcium atoms. The function of the calcium, of course, it's a builds hard tissue. It involves in the maturation of enamel and remineralization of initial damage. It is necessary as the activator of different enzymes, for example, saliva amylase, salivary amylase. With age, the content of calcium in saliva increases. At high concentration of calcium ions in the duct of the salivary glands can lead to formation of salivary stone, and this stone can block the duct. Combining with organic substances, calcium salt can form tartar deposited on the teeth. Magnesium. Magnesium involved in creating the structure of the teeth. It's the activator of the certain enzymes of saliva. Content of magnesium in the hydroxyapatite increases the solubility of enamel in the acid, and the content of magnesium increases with the age. Between the anions, on the first place, we can see here chloride. And the main function of chloride is regulate osmotic tension of saliva and activates alpha amylase. With carrier, the concentration of sodium decreases, but chloride increases. Fluorine. Fluorine affects the structure and processes of remineralization of enamel. It has antibacterial properties. Fluorine compounds is capable for inhibiting of bacterial flora and can be included in the plaque and enamel fluorapatites. Iodine plays a role in the defense mechanism mainly by the presence in the peroxidase system. The concentration of inorganic iodine in saliva is about 10 times higher than in a blood serum. Such way saliva glands can concentrate iodine. Bicarbonate, of course, here one of the important role of bicarbonate is the keep of the normal pH because it creates the strongest buffer in the saliva buffer system. Phosphate, the same, took part in the normalization of pH because we have a phosphate buffer system, phosphate, phosphoric acid. But together with this, phosphate involved in the maturation of enamel remineralization of initial damage, and it played the important role in the formation of the tartar. The constant of the phosphorus in the saliva higher than in the serum. Phosphorus is mainly included in the inorganic compounds and only 5% in organic ones. It is in the form of the pyro and orthophosphate. Calcium and phosphorus form compounds of the hydroxyapatite type. In saliva, a state of supersaturation with the hydroxyapatite is maintained, and this supersaturation prevents the enamel from the dissolving and promote the diffusion of these ions into the enamel and their adsorption on the enamel. It was found that in persons with multiple carriers, the supersaturation of saliva with hydroxyapatite on 24% lower than normally. There are many non-protein and nitrogen-free organic substances in the saliva, like hydroxyapatite, like carbohydrates, and of course mainly glucose lipids. Between them we can see triacylglycerol and phospholipids and cholesterol and derivative of cholesterol, steroids, hormone, the same are present in saliva. There are many non-protein but nitrogen-containing substances like uric acid. You know, it's a final result of the purine catabolism, and its concentration of uric acid in saliva is rather high, and it's play antioxidant function in saliva. And urea, we already tell about the function of urea in the saliva, a special role in the keeping of normal pH, and in the saliva we have very high activity of urease. We transform this urea into carbon dioxide and ammonium. Creatinine and amino acids, the same, are present in saliva. And of course, in saliva, we can see a number of different proteins. Total concentration of the proteins in saliva from 1 to 6 grams per liter. And all of these proteins we can divide in two groups, non-enzymes and enzymes. Between non-enzymatic groups, we can see mucins, statins, proline-rich proteins, histatins, immunoglobulins. We will tell about each of them, and a battery of different enzymes, the populist of them, of course, alpha amylase and and lingual lipase is the same, you know, and all other enzymes. I think that you are, they are known for you, like aspartate aminotransferase, adenosine deaminase, carbonic anhydrase, and other mucins. Mucins are a high molecular weight glycoproteins produced by the submandibular, sublingual, and numerous minus salivary gland. These mucins have the property of low solubility and high viscosity and high elasticity and strong adhesiveness. Mucins are a highly glycosylating protein with rather high concentration of the sugar from 50 up to 90% from the dry weight of the molecule. The biochemical and functional properties of mucins are mainly determined by the terminal residues, particular sialic acid, sulfate, or fucose. The N-terminal and C-terminal ends of this protein are rich of serine, threonine, alanine, and proline. Saliva contains two forms of mucins, Mg1 and Mg2. The Mg1 absorbs tightly to the tooth and contributes thereby to the enamel pellicle, which protects the tooth from the acidic challenges. Mg2 affects the aggregation and adherence of the streptococci mutant. Any intraoral content between the soft tissue or between soft tissue and teeth benefits from the lubricating capability of saliva supplied largely by these mucins. The capacity of mucins to protect epithelial surface depends largely on their high content of oligosaccharides and their ability to form a gel layer together with the other salivary proteins, like secretory immunoglobulins and albumins. Proline-rich protein. They are a member of closely related family, but the acidic proline-rich protein are found only in saliva. They comprise about 70% of the parotid proteins. Proline-rich proteins are characterized by a predominance of the amino acid proline, glycine, and glutamic acids. A total of 80% of all other amino acids in this protein. The acidic proline-rich protein binds calcium with a strength and that indicate that this protein may be important in the pellicle formation and in maintaining supersaturation of ionic calcium in relationship to the phosphate ions in saliva. Thereby, the acidic proline-rich protein may be have very important biological significance in the maintaining of the calcium homeostasis of saliva and in the preventing the formation of saliva stone. In addition, acidic proline-rich protein inhibit hepatitic crystal growth, suggesting that when absorbed on the tooth surface, they block specific mineral growth site. Another function proposed for the proline-rich protein is capacity to selectively mediate bacterial adhesion to tooth surface. Statrins. Statrins, they are salivary acidic protein consisting of 43 amino acids produced by acinar cell and in salivary acinar cell of the salivary glands. It contributes to the stabilization of the calcium and phosphate salt solution and serves as a lubricant to protect the tooth from the wear and may initiate the formation of the protective enamel pellicle by binding to hydroxyapatite. Statrins prevent spontaneous precipitation and crystallization of supersaturated calcium phosphate in ductal saliva and oral fluid and protect formation of the stone. Histatins are a family of relative, neutral, and basic histidine-rich peptides which are secreted mainly in parotid saliva and to a less extent in some mandibular saliva. They possess the essential antifungal and antibacterial activity. They inhibit the development of some yeast from the non-infective to the infective form and aggregate oral streptococci and inhibit the growth of some bacteria. In addition to antimicrobial activities, histatins are involved in the functions specific for the oral cavity, such as formation of the acquired pellicle and participation in the mineralization dynamics of the oral fluid. Another biological role of histatins in the oral cavity is the inhibition of the release of histamine from the mast cell and suggesting that they play a role in the oral inflammation. Cystatins are a family of cysteine-containing phosphoproteins that are secreted by the acinar cell. Cystatins act mainly as a cysteine protein. They have a minor role in the regulation of salivary calcium. They have been reported to bind to hydroxyapatite and therefore may play a role in acquired pellicle formation. On the other hand, cystatins have been shown to inhibit hydroxyapatite crystal growth. These proteins are also present in the plasma and may reach of the oral cavity via the gingival crevicular fluid. Lactoferrins. Lactoferrin is iron-binding glycoprotein produced by the intercalated duct cell. Lactoferrin linked to free iron in the saliva causes bactericidal or bacteriostatic effect on various microorganisms requiring iron from their survival, such as Streptococcus mutant group. This process is of starving bacteria of vital nutrients, and such way this causes is called nutritional immunity. Lactoferrin also provides fungicidal, antiviral, anti-inflammatory, and immunomodulatory functions. See here, secretory immunoglobulin A is the largest immunological component of saliva. Is an immunoglobulin produced by plasma cell, beta lymphocytes, B lymphocytes. It in connective tissue and translocated through the duct cells of many and major salivary glands. It is predominance immunoglobulins of the mucosal immune system. The complete secretory immunoglobulin molecule is made up of two 4-chain units of immunoglobulin A. In contrast of serum immunoglobulin A, exists largely as a monomer. Here you see dimer. Immunoglobulin A, while active on mucosal surface, also acts to neutralize virus, serves as an antibody to bacterial antigens, and works to aggregate or clumped bacterial, thus inhibiting bacterial attachment to oral tissue. Other immunoglobulins, such as immunoglobulin G and immunoglobulin N, present in saliva are in low quantities and probably come from the gingival crevicular fluid. Immunoglobulin A and immunoglobulin G have the ability to agglutinate Streptococcus mutant, facilitating their removal from the mouth with the swallowing saliva. Therefore, they influence reducing the adhesion of bacteria to the epithelials of the cheeks and tooth enamel. If we tell about digestive properties, digestive saliva is responsible for the initiation digestion of the starch, favoring for the formation of the food bolus. This action occurs mainly by the presence of the digestive enzymes alpha amylase in the composition of the saliva. And I am sure that you remember that it is characterized that the main function of the alpha amylase is catalysis of the hydrolysis of the alpha 1,4 glycosidic bonds between the glucose residues in homopolysaccharides like starch, glycogen, and dextrins, and its biological function is to give and starch, divide to starch into the maltose, maltotreose, and dextrins. The contribution of salivary alpha amylase to starch breakdown is limited because its action is inactivated in the acidic medium of the stomach and is consequently limited to the mouth only. And salivary alpha amylase is considered to be a good indicator of the properly functions of salivary glands, contributing 40 to 50 of the total salivary protein produced by the gland. Its greater part of this enzyme, 80%, is synthesized in the parotids and the remainder in the submandibular glands. Lingual lipase has an optimum pH about 4, so it is not active till it's entering an acidic environment of the stomach. It's secreted by one Ebner's glands of the tongue, and it involves, of course, in the fat digestion. It took part in the hydrolysis of triacylglycerol, and first of all, it's important in the digestion of the milk fat in newborn. Lysozymes, also called murimidase, was the first recognized by Fleming in 1922 for its antibacterial effect because its widespread occurrence. Lysozymes contributed to belong to a primary defense system, also known as the innate immune system. Lysozymes derives from the basal cell of the striated duct in the parotid glands, split bacterial cells walls leading to the destruction and inhibition of bacterial growth. Lysozyme is able to cleave beta-1,4 glycosidic bonds between muremic acid and N-acetylglucosamine residues in the peptidoglycan of the bacterial cell walls. Moreover, lysozymes promote the clearance of the bacteria through the aggregation. Gingival clavicular fluid also contributes lysozymes from the plasma. Salivary peroxidase, also known as sialoperoxidase or lactoperoxidase, catalyze bacterial metabolism by the product with the thiocyanate, which is highly toxic to bacterial system. Secreted by SNL cells, peroxidase additionally protect mucosa from the strong oxidizing effect of the hydrogen peroxidase provided by oral bacteria. Thiocyanate are also found in saliva, which are formed in the liver under the action. Thiocyanate is formed in the liver under the action of the rhodonase enzymes during the sulfonation of the cyanides. They are constant in saliva varies and depend on the degree of the human contact with the tobacco smoke and in the presence of the vitamin B1. It is believed that thiocyanate performs a protective function and activates the peroxidase enzymes that break down peroxide compounds. It is quite possible that saliva accumulate thiocyanate because they are constant in it, excite their content in other biological fluids. Regulation of saliva secretion. The secretion of saliva is controlled by a salivary center composed of the nuclei in the medulla. But there are specific triggers for this secretion. 3 types of the triggers or stimuli for this production are mechanical, the act of the chewing, gustatory, with the acid the most stimulating trigger and sweet the least stimulating, and olfactory. It is surprisingly, but olfactory is the poor stimulus. Other factors affecting secretion include psychic factors such as pain, certain types of medication, and various local or systemic diseases affecting the gland themselves. The production of saliva is stimulated both by the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetics. The saliva stimulated by the sympathetic innervation is thicker, and saliva stimulated by parasympathetically is more watery. And again, I want to repeat that there is no hormonal regulation of salivation. Sodium, chloride, calcium, bicarbonate, secretory cell protein, amylase, and mucose increase in concentration after stimulation, while phosphorus and potassium, duct cell proteins, and immunoglobulins decrease. The pH changes from being slightly acidic at rest to basic pH till pH 8 in ultimate stimulation. This increase in alkalinity is due to the increase of bicarbonate in saliva. Daily and annual rhythm of saliva are absorbed. Reduced salivation during sleep with the peak occurring at the end of the day. And um, during the year, the same we can see annual rhythm, and when we can see the decrease in salivation in the summer and a peak of salivation occurs in winter. These changes the concentration of salivary components such as salivary electrolytes and proteins. As a whole, protein content increases proportionally with increasing flow rate, but salivary protein concentration, like other salivary components, may be also subject to circadian variation and affecting by stress, inflammation, infection, and hormonal changing. In addition, protein content varies among persons, exhibit different polymorphic phenotype, and can inhibit strain species differences in the protein microbial interaction. Salivary dysfunction may be. For example, in too much and too little saliva can affect oral health and quality of life. Lack of saliva leads to dental decay, oral yeast infection, taste problem, bad breath, difficult speaking and swallowing, and recurrent salivary gland infection. Too much saliva can cause social problem and may be a sign of the underlying medical problem. Hypersalivation may be associated with many disorders such as herpetic stomatitis, irritation by the dentures and pregnancy, but drooling does not occur in this case unless the ability to hold secretion within the mouth or the ability to swallow secretion is impaired. It is the differences between the salivary production and the ability to swallow saliva that results in the drooling rather than the absolute production of saliva. Patients with the Parkinson's disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, cerebral vascular accidents, dementia, and developmental disorders are prone to this. Patients in the very advanced stages of dying may also experience difficulties in their loose, their swallowing, and cough reflexes. In xerostomia, dry mouth, here may be different. It's a common causes of the xerostomia are medication with different drugs, for example, clonidine, dehydration, and mouth breathing. We know we tell that in whole saliva includes and gingival crevicular fluid, and gingival crevicular fluid is a fluid occurring in the minute amount on the gingival crevice. It contains thickly plasma proteins which improve adhesion of the epithelial attachment and have antimicrobial properties and exert antibody activity. Gingival clavicular fluid has extremely various composition: leukocytes, lymphocytes, monocytes, inorganic ions like potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium, phosphate, inorganic molecules such as different proteins, albumins, gamma globulins, immunoglobulins, a number of enzymes, acidic and alkaline phosphatase, cathepsins, collagenase, dipeptidyl peptidase, elastase, lactate dehydrogenase, lactoferrin, lysozymes, plastinogen activators, bacterial products, epithelial cells from the tissue desquamation. And the functions of gingival clavicular fluid, it has protective effect, the clearance of cells and potentially dangerous bacterial molecules, and antibacterial action of immunoglobulins. Plaque formation includes by the calcium ions on the gingival margin. But sometimes we can see a negative effect because it can take part in the tartar formation, including by the alkaline phosphatase. And proteolytic enzymes are dangerous for the gingival sulcus and other gingival tissues. If we tell about dental liquid is a liquid that fills the void of tooth tissue. Nutrients come to dental tissue with it, and dental liquid divides on the dentin and enamel liquid. If we tell about dentin liquid, is 20% by the weight of the dentin and 20% of its volume. It contains mineral and organic substances, calcium, phosphate, chloride, proteins similar to the blood plasma proteins, amino acids, enzymes, vitamins, micronutrients. Dentin liquid moves toward the enamel at the rate approximately 4 millimeter per hour and performs trophic functions. Enamel liquid less studied because it composed only about 10% of the enamel. Since the dimensions of enamel microspaces very small through the hydroxyapatite crystals, and through a sieve enamel liquid pass only a small size molecule such as minerals, trace elements, small organic molecules. And of course, we can use saliva and widely use it for the as a diagnostic materials, because saliva has advantages as a diagnostic materials, availability and non-invasive way of the sampling. And saliva is used as an indicator of the degree of the risk of dental caries among of secreted saliva, buffer capacity, content of the microorganism. Saliva the same can be used for the determining of the concentration of the steroid hormones, different drugs, in the toxicology to determine the concentration of different metals, lithium, cadmium, gallium, addictive substances, drugs, and the metabolites such as amphetamine, cocaine, marijuana, opiates, in the presence of saliva a few minutes after use, and it's kept for 24 hours. Alcohol is detected in saliva after 20 minutes of injection and maintenance for 12 hours. And of course, saliva is used for diagnosis of the certain diseases, including cancer, cardiovascular, autoimmune, infection, and rubella and hip and viral infection of the liver. You know, COVID, the same we can detect in the saliva. And of course, saliva is used the forensic medicine. That's all that I want to tell you today during this our last lecture. Next on now on the exam, and of course I want to wish you good luck for this exam, and thank you for your attention. Goodbye, dear students.